what's his name? My mind isn't working too well.
In Monsters Ball?
No, there's a Tongues Untied. Who was the film director of that? It was about a black gay.
Lee Daniels.
Lee Daniels was the director of Monsters Ball. The name will come to me in a moment. I've talked to him before, but one of the things that he says is that he looked for his salvation in a white lover, and did to the pornotroping of Halle Berry in my relationship, not manifest in that way. But here's what I did write about in my memoir: is a dynamic in which, whether one is a black male or a black female, and if one is a black male with a white female, then the power dynamic is always on the side of the white woman, even though the black man has a greater musculature than the white woman. And
why is that so?
Why is that so?
Yes, sir.
Well, because I think that in our everyday common sense kinds of discussions, and this is not my fault or your fault or any of your listeners' fault. This is the fault of the way in which we're taught to think about relationships. We're taught to think about relationships in a way in which we conflate brute force and misrecognize it as power. And we tend to do that more easily when the one figure is a black male and the other figure is a white woman, because the black male could physically destroy this white woman. We tend to believe that the possibility of that brutal force actually being prevailing in hand-to-hand combat actually says something about these two individuals' relationship to institutional power. And it doesn't. The police and the apparatus of policing is always on the side of the white woman. It's never on the side of the black man. So these were the problems that I wrote about with respect to my own relationship. And sometimes, on rare occasions, you find someone who will actually surrender to that logic, and once they see it, then accept it and spend their lives working against white supremacy and white domination. Most of the time, what you find is that the person responds with a kind of three-part movement that you can actually set your watch by: aggressivity, then guilt, and then resentment, and then breaking off the relationship. But I think that the direct answer to your question is that we mistake the power, the force inside one's body, to have something to do with institutional power, and that's the hardest thing to overcome in people's thinking in this country. Now, I think with respect to Monsters Ball, again, this is a very, very complicated thing, but it's when Justice asked me the questions about half-white healing. Half-white healing is one of the 3 chapters in the book that talks about Monsters Ball. The film positioned P. Diddy and Karenji Calhoun, which were the stars that played the husband and the child of Halle Berry. They positioned them as being kind of monstrous black masculine figures. Karenji Calhoun was fat, overweight, and almost like a plague on his mother's life. And P. Diddy, his character was called Lawrence Musgrove, and he was the quintessential black threat, criminal threat. And once the film did away with those two people, then it was free to have what society would like to think of as a genuine interracial relationship between the woman who figures as biracial or mulatta and the white man. But and I always mean mulatta in quotation marks. I hope your listeners understand. But I understand it's a derogatory term, and I use it in quotation marks. But when we actually analyze the film very, very closely, what we find is that Halle Berry's figure, her character, Letitia Musgrove, is never a partner with respect to Hank, Billy Bob Thornton's character. She is always a kind of sexual toy that he has a kind of melancholy and romantic attitude towards. But the things that come up in the film, the ideas that go counter to his racism, are ideas that come from other white people, like his son, Sonny, and like the three women, his wife, his wife and his mother, the two women who are dead in the courtyard. So in the graveyard behind the house. So he's always kind of in a conversation with other white people. Other white people are intellectual forces on his psyche. And what we find is that even though he's sleeping with Halle Berry, she's never an intellectual interlocutor, never an intellectual conversationalist with him. She's never someone who makes an impact on his worldview, so that she actually lives physically, she breathes through the whole film, but she has no more life than the real, quote, black people who actually die in the film. And it would be a very different relationship and a very different film if one of two things happened. For example, she actually busted out one day and said, hey, let me talk about the prison industrial complex. You know? And they had...
That took my husband, my child's father.
Exactly. And they began to actually show in the film that even though they had, kind of sexual attraction for each other, they were antagonists. And if he then came over to this analysis and not only quit his job as a prison guard, but joined the revolution against, and I don't mean necessarily just getting up one day and picking up a gun. I mean actively seeking to abolish the prison industrial complex. If he went on the road speaking against the prison industrial complex, if he did all, there could be all sorts of things in that film that would not change the power relation between them, but could change the daily experience between them and make him act in a treacherous manner towards everybody and his wife, then we'd have a very different kind of film, and I would not have this same kind of critique. But we don't. And you know how I know? You know how I know that this critique is actually truthful and that everyone understands this critique at an intuitive level? Here's how I know it. Because the screenwriters tried to get this film made about 8 times, right? And they couldn't do it. And in the original screen, because everyone intuits the nature of relations between us and the world in this country, in the screenplay, the first, it could have been 5, it was over 5, but less than 10 times that they pitched this film, the film always ended with Halle Berry getting a gun and blowing Billy Bob Thornton away when he came back from the restaurant with the ice cream. Do you see what I'm saying? They understood the dynamic, the real dynamic between these two. But it took a black man, Lee Daniels, the producer, to get with them and say, listen, this is why you're not selling this film. Change the ending. Make it a romantic redemption. He comes in with the ice cream, They go out on the porch, and he feeds her the ice cream. And then she looks at the grave of Sonny and the two women, and her gaze towards the grave says that you suffer in your white life just like I suffer. And I think that's really interesting because these two white cats would never have sold that trope if a brother hadn't come along. I use brother pejoratively here, and told them how they need to change it.